Welcome to Remarkable WAM.
I'm still able to test cans of beer that seem to turn up at my door every other day that I may order or may not order, just to sample other people's beverages.
Yeah, I had a milk beer the other day. That was minging. That was awful. I don't know who invented that.
Yeah, but we need to start. I mean, you know, to be very fair, whether just to try and promote the future, but it's all about it's Ledbury Real Ales, isn't it? That's the place to go. Just to have a completely unsolicited plug and unnecessary, but let's just make sure that happens throughout this conversation.
This episode is brought to you by Ledbury Ales.
It's apart from the fact you can't get any of it anymore, Chris. It's
but scarcity is a wonderful marketing tool. It's been used throughout for the ages. How much would it cost you to commission a barrel for a punter?
We funny enough, we do that. We brewed some for the Generations. So Generation Asset Management had its anniversary a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
We did some beer for Al Gore. The Generation guys came over and brewed it themselves. So they brewed on my small kit. They brewed 4 casks, so 300 pints, just under. And then they had it at their party, and one was called Al Gore and one was called something else.
Gore.
Couldn't publish that because I was under NDA not to. But yeah, we do bits and pieces like that. We do quite a lot for Worcester Rugby Club for the Worcester Warriors.
Well, they're doing so well.
They're terrible. They're at the bottom of the league, aren't they? They get really excited when they get a losing bonus point, which I think is a bit sad.
That's if anybody in the Worcester Warriors are listening to this, it's going to get better soon. Come up the Warriors, a pint of Warrior, please.
They're playing very well. They're just sadly not being able to quite get it over the line.
A key part of the game.
So, Ant, I know we've talked in a relatively similar way before, and you do realise this time there is a formal agenda item. I say formal, but there's a quiz. Who's got the bell?
I've got the bell. I found the bell. After how many have we done? 9 quizzes without a bell. So it's happening.
When are you going to press the bell?
When I get an answer right.
I mean, but Andy, we haven't even rehearsed this. This would go horribly wrong.
If I get a question right, I'm dinging that bell all the way to the broken.
So are you ready, Ant, for the intellectual gymnastics that will be required? I say gymnastics. Let's just say Andy doesn't even know what a pommel horse is. So you're fine.
It's one of those things you used to run into at gym.
Yeah.
Used to run about. Yeah, you'd run and you go, I'm going to do what they do on the telly. I'm going to double vault it, and you run, and the thing got bigger and bigger, and then at the last minute you chicken out, run into it. Yeah.
Oh dear. Well, look, let's kick off. So, but it's be nice and easy, Ant. You're very good at this, I know. So anyhow, kicking off. So look, my name's Chris Mills, and together with my friend Andy Reid, we are your hosts in this ongoing podcast, or vodcast, whatever we like to call it. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. This is Remarkable WAM, that's Remarkable Wealth and Asset Management. And today we'll be hearing some more remarkable stories, activities and initiatives from another remarkable guest. Andy, what's the big picture here? What are we really trying to string together?
We are ultimately stringing together a blueprint for a brand new world of wealth and asset management. And our guest is not backwards in coming forwards around this. He thinks it's a broken world of work and there's an opportunity there to redesign it. But ultimately, we're motivated by making that last stronghold against innovation collapse under our creative majesty. And with any luck, we'll make lives better for people there in the street. So I'm interested in hearing a bit about the piping that can make that happen. But I'm really interested in hearing from Ant about some of the behaviours, the mindsets in the industry, and see if they can't be challenged as well, because there's no shortage of ideas, but ideas are no good sitting on a PowerPoint somewhere. We need to go and get them done. So I'm really looking forward to today's episode.
No, I think you picked up some wonderful points. I think, we're definitely going to try and stick to our principles of simplicity and informality to get to the point. But let's talk about Ant. A little bit of an intro, and hopefully I'll embarrass him. But today we're joined by the eclectic and knowledgeable Ant Stevens. As we talked about before, as well as rowing and running, Ant actually studied something at university, biomedical science and microbiology, before starting his career seemingly really in sort of relationship management. I think that's where it sort of seemed to, according to your LinkedIn profile, this is.
Is that right? Is it, Chris?
Oh yeah, I've got to go with the gospel there. So then you yeah, exactly. then you picked more of an analytical path. So was it Mellon Analytical Solutions, RWAM's Technologies, and then into Northern Trust Performance Services team?
Yeah, a bit of a way around. So
Well,
when I left uni, Chris, I did study biomedical science and microbiology, which I thought at some stage I'd quite like to be a teacher. And actually, the only time I think I've then used my degree is, post when we started the brewery a few years ago, which has come in perfectly handy. But I don't think it's been particularly handy for my main career choice. So when I left uni, I went to work for a small stockbrokers out in Norwich called Waters Lunnis. Part of the Norwich and Peterborough. So I did quite a lot of probate within that space. And then I moved to London to work for Sainsbury's. So I actually started my career in retail management on a Sainsbury's home-based management training course, and then came into London working in home-based stores around North London, and then through sort of store management. So my route into the city was a bit circuitous. I think I ended up leaving Sainsbury's to go to work for Kingfisher, so for B&Q.
Oh, okay.
I went for the money. I'll be honest. I was secured by a £2,000 pay rise, which really was massive for me at that point. I think I went from £12,000 to £14,000 a year, and I was the king of the hill. Realised I didn't particularly enjoy working there, so I went and bought a pub with a friend of mine. So we bought a pub in Croydon, down in South Croydon. Simon and I bought that pub, and then the reason I got into finance is one of my locals in the pub was a chap called Steve Kirby, who was the head of international operations at Mercury Asset Management.
Yes.
And he worked with a friend of mine who I'd worked with in Norwich. And so he came to the pub, we got chatting, and eventually he offered me a job as a contractor temp in their performance and risk team.
It's fascinating. Yeah. I mean, all the best stories start in Croydon. I mean, I'm biased there. I
think the learning is networks, not Croydon.
Sorry. No, I mean, it's fascinating. It's what I love about it is that and forgive me, Ant, is that wonderful old school nature about it, is the fact that, a bit of serendipity, a bit of optimism about starting a pub, a bit of, let's go for it, and who knows where you are. It's amazing.
Yeah, look, the retail background, gents, I think has been a real benefit for me, because you learn to manage a box. And you learn to manage that sort of chain of how the box gets from the manufacturer through the distribution site into store. The Sainsbury's network was very, very smart in the way that it could get stock into the shelves. You didn't have a lot of warehouse space, and I don't think most Sainsbury's have got any now at all. And then we also started to work on technology within that space as well. So when you start to think that the first loyalty card came out of Homebase, it was their spend and save card, and what they did with the data from that. And then marketing, working with the guys that were doing marketing and promotion. You each got a meter of the store, and that's what you looked after, and that's what you promoted. So the merchandisers, and you started to really understand from a very basic point what people buy, why they buy it, and how you manage that supply chain. So when I came into finance, I don't think it was really that much different. It is different, but actually a lot of the basics are there about people management. You're managing quite a lot of students in the shop. So there's a whole lot of skills that were actually really interchangeable. And I've always looked for people to work in my groups that have got diverse backgrounds. because you don't need another me. And you know, Chris, you really don't want another me. But what's the point in bringing another person in who's got the same background? So I quite like the idea of bringing people in from different backgrounds. You know, healthcare is one I've always found that works really well across into finance. It's a really similar background. So yeah, I think my background in retail was a real setup for what I've been trying to do in finance and certainly in the innovation group, which is just trying to do things differently and using other technologies from other sites and other parts of the market to try and bring that into what we're doing here.
Well, let me. I mean, you picked about 2 or 3 themes that I'd love to carry on. One is your point about retail and dealing with customers. One is, alluded to that data point, which I think is a very interesting one as well. Going back to the first one, it will be really interesting to see how you think your work applies to the man on the street. I know it's a long chain, but just be interesting to think about that. And the third one I think would be really interesting is building that team and that innovation culture. I'd be interested to see what you in the current environment, particularly under lockdown conditions. I think it's tougher than ever, but more required than ever. But I think, just to set the scene for our listeners, because now I think if I get the words right, Ant, you're the global head of product innovation in the corporate and institutional services unit at Northern Trust.
Yeah, quite a long title.
Yeah. I know, but it's impressive. But you look at, and if I try to capture it, you look at new and existing technologies. You work with your internal experts. You work with startups and fintech and external partners developing new propositions. I think we met. I think we actually physically did. We meet in your Guernsey office and discussing blockchain solutions for the private equity market. I think that's where we kicked off our.
That's right. Yeah, and then you worked just around the corner in London, so we met up a couple of times post that.
Yeah.
And
but have I got your world right now? Is that?
Yeah. I think I thought I had the best job in the bank, and I think after I met my boss Justin Chapman, I think I've got the second best job in the bank. But I have got an awful lot of rope to go and just do lots of stuff. So what they've been very good at, and Northern's one of those banks that you think could be quite a bit crusty because it's a it's a big old custody bank, right? It's not the most exciting bank of banks. If you want to be in an exciting bank, you want to go and work for Goldman's or Morgan's or someone like that, right? Who've got money to spend, and they seem to do really quite exciting stuff with it. What we then generally do, and what I think I quite like, is we're a very thoughtful process. We do things for the right reasons. We do go to market first with some quite complicated innovation that we're doing. We're not shy to do it. We do it in a way that I think is, for me personally, works really well. We partner very closely with other firms. And Chris, I think you and I probably started looking at this because of that partnership model, because we like the people we work with. We deliver what we say we're going to deliver. It's sometimes it's hard to get it there on time and quite right, but we're working in a field where we're doing some quite new stuff. But we're not shy to just give it a go, and if we fail quick. And I know that's a bit of a cliche, but we've got massive flow. So as a bank, I've got a huge amount of money. We're not far off $10 trillion, across asset management and custody and wealth. And we're not scared to go to clients and say, we're going to try something new. Do you want to be involved? The risks to you are X. We're going to put your flow on this. And so we can very quickly go to market with flow and with other partners where, I think it's a very different model. And it really works for us. And because we've now got our own separate dev teams, we can build things quickly. We were the first part of the bank to go to the public cloud, which was a huge challenge for us to get there, but has given us a massive amount of scope since. And like you say, we can go and use little fintech businesses or actually big fintech businesses, bring them in, partner with them, and very quickly prove out functions. So, and actually it's not just financial stuff. I've been doing stuff across the whole gamut of technology. And my boss allows me to go and do that. You know, I've still got to do some work, right? But I get to play around in a lot of things where, you know, we probably wouldn't have time if you have a day job that's a bit more prescriptive. So yeah, I've got a brilliant job, and I get to work with some really, you know, pretty exciting people and things.
Well, you're probably top of my list for a job swap, I have to say. So that's just envy talking, I have to say. But is it just one person's vision that gave Northern Trust the bravery to step outside their traditional, you know, custody kind of operations? Is it one or two folk? Is that how that innovation started, you think?
So, you know, I worked in the old product group, but I worked I sort of built a new position with my boss at the time, Fiona Horswell, put me into a role which we call product solutions, which was trying to link across the different product silos within Northern and build something out that would allow us to link, you know, cash with lending, with collateral, with, you know, so we weren't very good at cross-pollinating across the different sectors. You know, you had your own rules and you had your own things you needed to build for your own client base. And so my job really that Fiona put me into was to try and build things across that. So you use what we had across them in a much more sort of solution orientated way. Pete Chowich, who, you know, runs CNIS, and Justin, who was running the market advocacy group. So very much talking to, you know, people like our investment into R3, talking to the regulators, you know, working on regulatory papers. So Justin was running that group, and Justin and I had a real interest in DLT. And I used to bore the product team with daily updates around what was happening with Ethereum and Ethereum going live, not going live, this, that, and the other. You know, I was going off to little meetings in Whitechapel and meeting up with people who were working in DLT, right? Purely because I thought it was an interesting technology and it would have some impact at some stage. Justin was equally as keen. So we were given a sort of throwaway comment, which was, you talk about this technology all the time, Anthony, go and do something with it. So Pete just came to us and said, just do something with it. But I want you to go live within 6 months with a client, with a regulator, and just prove you can do it. And I said, okay. So this was about June 16, something like June 16. Yeah. Technology was relatively new. So, I mean, IBM was an obvious place for us to go and talk for the work that they've been doing with Hyperledger and Fabric. And we literally said, we will do this. And I think it was our first foray into quite a few things, you know, which we'd been doing in the bank, but I think this was the first time we put it all together. So, you know, looking at the methodology of how do we do stuff, looking at the ownership structure as who makes the decisions, how quickly can you do something, realize you've done it wrong and throw it away and start again. You know, what are the rules of the road around governance and security, and, you know, who do you work with? So we said the only way this is going to work is if you really give us a sort of startup team and take away all of that structure. And I want to be able to go to one of three people with a problem. So I could go to Fiona, Pete, or Justin, and if I had a problem, they cleared it without any messing around. They just got it done and said problem solved. So within 6 months we'd gone. So yeah, we started in July 16. We went live the product actually went into production in like December. We went to market in Feb. So we put a Guernsey private equity fund onto a distributed ledger, and it was Unigestion that we were working with at the time. PwC could do real-time audit off that fund. And we had nodes distributed across a number of jurisdictions, with the regulator in Guernsey, the GFSC, working with us around substance and making sure that the application met the rules of the jurisdiction. And we were, I'd say, hugely lucky, right? And this was, as a first attempt, we realized that we started on Ethereum. 3 months in, we realized it wasn't going to work. We threw it away, started again. So we had a 6-month build, and we spent 3 months working on something. The normal temptation, Chris and Alex, is just to carry on and make it work. We knew it wasn't right. We threw it away. We started again. We then moved cloud provider, and we moved off Microsoft Azure, and we went on to IBM's own cloud, which we then came off again. So we were figuring out how the technology was going to work, but we still managed to do it within 6 months, and we came in under budget. And the whole thing cost us, I don't know, about 250 grand, with a couple of $100,000 worth of, you know, legal and everything else that went on top of it. And what we went to market with was a product that worked, proved the technology with a live client, moving live transactions, with a regulator that had a view to it, and with an auditor that was able to audit in real time. You know, I couldn't have asked for something better. And that was really, for me, the sort of, you know, we 1 for 1. All right, let's be honest. You know, we got lucky through the process, right? But we had 1 for 1. I think, you know, if we got 2 out of 10 right, you know, we're probably not in a bad shape, right? You know, so we were a good start. That gave the bank, I think, the comfort that we knew what we were doing and we could get it done.
And in that story, it's a brilliant story into which Chris and I could jump into. Maybe out of this podcast, I want to mine you further. But you mentioned there, it's 1 for 1, and there's an element of luck. But in the design and delivery of that project, not the solution, the actual design and delivery of project, you've already alluded to a couple of success factors, maybe pieces of advice and instruction for us as we start our remarkable journey. You spoke that you had clear line of sight to Peter, Fiona, and was it Roger?
Justin.
Justin,
yeah.
Pardon me. So Peter, Fiona, and Justin. So you're facilitating that project. If you had come across an element of friction, you could speak to those 3, and they would release it for you and just get it done. That seemed to be quite an important factor.
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
And then in your narrative, very briefly, you spoke at, right, I just want a team just on their own. Like, I just imagine a box of people free from the daily grind. If that's true, great. What other tactical pieces of advice do you think we ought to take on board to secure the successful project? Apart knowing that, I've done a few, and the usual advice is a bit prosaic. So, you need great leadership, great structures, skills, tools, and management oversight.
And a massive
yeah, I know. I can write that down without getting going. But come on, let's get to the next layer, the stuff that doesn't get mentioned, but is actually probably more critical than the other obvious stuff.
So you mentioned people. You know, I think that having the right team of people, and I say this in not really skill set. Well, we ran a sort of, and I know the guys at 11FS talked a lot about this when they first started, but we ran a do the next task type of process. So we weren't precious about our job titles or who was in charge. And I always say this, we ran a very flat structure, and everyone laughs at me and goes, well, you can't run a flat structure because someone's got to tell us what to do. And it was always you, Anthony. So it wasn't a flat structure. But I think it was flat enough that if a job needed doing, there was nobody precious within the team. They just got on and did it. So, I mean, I remember I was writing user stories and, you know, trying to get things into Jira, you know, not my skill set. And actually, I probably didn't do a brilliant job of it, and people probably had to pick them up and do them again. But you just got on and did it. You know, we'd got an RM in Guernsey, Pascal Mayer, who was working with us, and he was getting involved in writing requirements because we just needed the right people to do the job. And we had a very good team, and those people had good relationships in the wider project. And this is the bit about people I think is really important. Mm. The GFSC came and sat with us as we kicked off, as did the Guernsey government. And Colin Vorden, who works in the government in Guernsey, was very good at opening doors and just saying, who do you need to speak to on the island? Tom Carey from Carey Olsen law firm did a whole load of work for us because him and Richard Fields, who was at Carey's at the time, thought that what we were doing was the right thing to do. And actually with him and with Nick Vermeulen from PwC, when I first met them, I said, what I am going to try and build here, and I hope you're going to help me, is going to reduce your income in the things that you do. And are you really on board for the change that we're going to put in place? And they both wholeheartedly accepted the fact that the world was changing and they were going to start building a product that was going to eat their own lunch. And that whole concept of working with a group of people who understood that if they stood still, they were probably going to die slowly. If they got involved, they were going to die a bit quicker, but they were going to be on the inside of that change. And I have to say, Nick at PwC has been instrumental in a lot of the thinking we've been able to do, because he was very quick. I mean, we went to see Collar Capital, and Nick was presenting the product that he built, and he built it overnight. It took him like, I don't know, 8 hours to build an application that would take real-time data from a ledger, parse it into a file that he was interested in, put it into Google Docs so that he could visualize it and stick it into an internal engine. And he sat up one night and took free-to-use software off the internet and built, in effect, a product. Not scalable, and certainly you wouldn't use it, but it proved that you could very quickly do something. So when we sat in front of a client and they were like going, "Oh, we've got this big project and it's going to cost us millions," Nick's sort of sitting there going, "Well, here you go. This is how you do it." So the difference in thinking between somebody like Nick allowed us to very quickly move forward with various parts of the project.
So there's a pattern there of people taking ownership where they see their ability or wherewithal, or give it a go-ment, they'd have a go. They weren't waiting for you to direct them, and they weren't waiting for a sort of formal mandate. They could see your language of do the next task. They could identify what the next task was going to be, or was morphing around, and they would give it a go. Is that right? So
exactly.
What engendered that system? What gave them the freedom to move without getting slapped on the wrist, perhaps?
These are all external firms as well, right? They're partners that we shared a vision with.
Yeah.
And as Chris knows me well, I'm quite an excitable character. When I get something that I think is cool, I don't shut up about it. And I think that there is a passion that I saw in other people that had similar feelings around how the world was going to change. And I explained how I thought we were going to change the world and disrupt ourselves within Northern Trust about what we were doing and why it was important. And I think I found like-minded individuals who saw the thing changing in their own shop. So Nick at PwC, Mark LePage, who was at the regulator at the time, and is now over at EY, is very, very similar thinking about the way that we want to change things. Clients that we were working with, so the guys over at Unigestion, and now the guys at Emerald, who we've been doing a lot of our work with, Kevin Muller at Collar, Nick Watkins at Partners Group. I can name 25, 30 people who are not working at Northern Trust, who have put in time, effort, hard yards, and some of their team to work on this project, because they all see the benefit to the ecosystem. And that is going to change the way they do things. And that's, I think, has been the really most powerful thing that I have seen, is how other people, when they feel that you're all doing something for the right reasons, will really just get on board and drive the vision, because they then believe it's their vision too, right? And it wasn't just my vision or Justin's, right? It was a combined vision of talking to like-minded individuals who, across multiple businesses, are now trying to drive the vision with their own views, right? But it's important, we've all got a very similar vision, which is, reduce costs, reduce, friction, more efficiency, all for the same goal, which is more money for the pensioner at the end of the day.
So I mean, yeah, and we get to that in a minute. I just want to quickly, so just to put the context, I'm really aware that you hear these stories of success, and it just sounds like everything slots into place. And you've mentioned 25 people there, and and your point about one for one, it certainly wasn't 25 conversations and 25 people were brought into that. To set the scale, my guess is that you spoke to hundreds of people. Over that time, you and your collective team were speaking to hundreds of people. So I think it's important, you drew on, maybe your hit rate was 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 for the people who bought into that to then go on that journey. Is that reasonable?
You always remember the ones that say yes, don't you?
Yeah,
the ones that say thanks, but no thanks, you sort of quickly forget about and move on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, look, you're absolutely right, Chris. We spoke to, I think Justin and I, in a 2-year period, did something like 200 meetings a year, between us. And that was here, It was in the States because we went and saw all the big funds in the States and all the big fund managers over there to share the vision, because this wasn't, I guess the hardest thing for us was we didn't see this as a Northern Trust product. We saw this as something that Northern would build and then give to the market. So we saw this as an industry utility. And for a couple of reasons, that was difficult for people at Northern to understand, that we were building something and then going to give it to the market. Why would you do that? Why wouldn't you build it, stick a lot of clients on it and make some money out of it, right? And there is an element that you've sort of got to do that, right? Because, business still has to pay the bills. But the long-term goal was always to give this to the market as an ecosystem, which, we did last year with our deal with Broadridge. But that meant that we spoke to lots of people, right? Not just clients, but we also spoke to potential investors. We spoke to VC funds. We spoke to, guys that were running money in, various places, looking at whether they wanted to invest. We talked to all of the technology companies about what they saw and how they saw the vision. We talked to hundreds and hundreds of people. You're absolutely right. The ones that I know have stuck with us are all very similar in the way that they see change.
Right.
And I wonder if in some cases they can't drive that change easily within their own businesses. And I think maybe this came along and they could show change and how that change may happen by using, what we were doing within Northern, because we were directly building things that would benefit them and their internals. Yet it was us that were building it for them.
Right.
So, the bit that Nick, the thing that Nick built, on the audit side, Nick did himself, right? We teed it up so we knew with him what we needed to deliver so he could link to it. He built his own internal piece. And maybe that's why we had that success, because we found people who maybe were struggling internally to prove innovation, and this has helped them along the route.
And that's where I think, Andy, on your list of ingredients for innovative success or success in innovation, I think you need to put in there, it's a combination of hard graft of going to see the meetings, but it's almost access as well. And I think that's one of the things that fintech don't have. The ability that you leveraged really well, Ant, was that you set up the you had access and ability to set up the meeting.
Yeah, the right story would be a consistent element of Ant's successful project. It's a piece of technology or a product that has great utility for everyone. Everybody will benefit. So we would like you to get hold of this. So the story's strong. It's being able to put that story in front of the right person at the right time.
Yes.
And if you've got Northern Trust, the brand will speak for itself, and you have the ability to open a few doors. I'm speaking on behalf of Chris and myself, but also other would-be innovative listeners who are thinking, well, we've got a passion about a particular piece of technology, but it's just me and Jeff and the dog and a can of Coke, and we're in a garage, and we don't have that sort of networked access. So what can be done to a compelling story to elevate it through a few keyholes? Is there any advice there?
So there's two things I'll sort of say. One, just to loop back on the last point, which one of the reasons we went to Guernsey was because that network is even tighter. Everybody that you need to know is in a mile radius, and they generally all know each other, and they generally all figure out what they're trying to. Plus, they are very passionate about developing Guernsey as a site for continued site for finance. So when you want to go to see the government, the state, pension fund, the regulator, it's a much easier conversation to have. And actually, Northern's the largest financial employer on the island, with the third largest employer outside of Specsavers and the government. So, as you're right, route to market for Northern there is, is good, and that was a noticeable reason for going specifically to Guernsey. The bit around the sort of how does small fintech firm get into the market, we did a bit of work on this in the past, and and I know, Chris, you've got a lot of thoughts on this because of what you guys have been up to. Finance is really hard because of what we put in, the barriers we put in place for the right reasons, to make sure that you are only putting the technology into your shop that is safe and secure, scalable, doesn't have key man risk, So for a small firm, and we saw a lot of them. So when we first started the innovation group and Justin's group, we probably saw 400 fintech firms across our entire group within a year, right? I reckon
400.
In that first year, there was probably half a dozen of that group that knew what they were talking about. Most of them were just, they got some whizzy technology, but didn't have a clue what to do with it.
Half a dozen, 6 out of 10.
I'd say half a dozen, yeah. And a lot of them you would walk away from and go, they found a piece of technology that they used at university, and they've just walked into a bank and gone, why don't you buy this? And you're looking at the people going, might be a good idea, you're not really sure, but you as people are not buying. I can't buy into you. You don't have the knowledge of the market for what you're trying to do. You've got no clue how to sell this to a bank.
It's the context, is it?
Yeah, and that very quickly changed. The following year, you started seeing long in the tooth bankers who had partnered up with the decent, technology groups, and they were obviously trying to provide the route through to market. And you saw that market change quickly. The problem statement is still that banks are really quite difficult to sell to for very good reasons. You cannot put technology into a bank if it has holes in it, if it doesn't integrate with legacy, if it's difficult to use. You're generally replacing something else. So you've got to make sure you replace something else with the technology. If not, you end up running 2 technologies and then 2 operational stacks. And it's not easy. And it's an awfully long process when procurement get involved and product risk get involved and everybody else gets involved. And most of these firms can't stomach the time. And eventually, actually, in a lot of cases, they won't get through the process anyway. So you get to a point where you've got too many people within the bank saying, are you really sure you want to bring this in? So it's not a brilliant place to start trying to sell technology to. Go to retail, where you can spin technology up relatively quickly, get clients using it and bring income in. So there are easier places to go to. And I think if you look at where blockchain is right now, most of the announcements in the DLT space are not coming out of finance. They're coming out of retail. It's music rights have gone onto blockchain. It's aluminium tracking has gone onto blockchain. It's, there's another diamond tracking system that's just gone onto blockchain. It's medical rights, it's sports rights, it's
shipping containers.
And IBM have been doing a lot of work with Maersk in that space. But it's not, oh, look, there's another big bank done something with blockchain. And that's the problem with DLT. It's not the easy thing because it's a backbone technology rather than an app. Putting apps into banks, probably easier in retail banks than it is into. I think it's just technology is hard in banks, and then anything gets hacked and you're in trouble. So there's been a noticeable big hack recently through a piece of technology that was implemented in an awful lot of businesses, which now has probably focused tech, the sort of that side of the bank into saying, well, actually, do I want to bring anything else in at the moment? How do I know it's safe and secure? What's the risk? So the problem with the sort of fortress model is it's really difficult to then change that model because you're increasing risk, and a lot of people don't want to increase risk. So
I'm gonna try and draw a parallel into that retail element, because I'll just be interested to see. I think one of the great successes of your project, which was in essence about smoothing the value chain of private equity, and I think what you did almost uniquely at the time was look at the whole value chain. You effectively started to look at the problem from capturing it as digitally as you possibly could through the use of looking at the contractuals and lawyers at the top end, moving through the process, and as you've mentioned a couple of times, real-time audit, any process that has customers and clients, beneficiaries in the middle, bookended by lawyers and accountants. Well, you can't get better than that, surely. But actually, you tackled the whole value chain, and I'll be interested to see, how do you think, taking that model, how do we help, as you alluded to very quickly, how do we help Mrs. Miggins and her pension? Where do you see your project, and where do you see some of the green shoots in helping the everyman?
Yeah. So yeah, we did exactly that, Chris. It's maybe we've talked about this before, but we did a full pain point analysis, and one of the guys that worked with me, Wayne Hanaway, I think, made a mission out of making them the most detailed pain point analysis that he'd ever done. And we went off and whiteboarded out every actor.
So much pain.
Oh, honestly, mate, there was pain everywhere. There was pain you didn't even know about that was painful. What it allowed us to do is it allowed us to interview everybody in the chain, and whether that was, some of those were NT relationships and some of them were relationships that were passed to us that these guys are, you know, are the right people to talk to in that space. But we went end to end. We did. We went outside of our comfort zone. So Northern, as an administrator, doesn't do fund launch, right?
Right.
The first, you know, we may sign an agreement with an investment advisor when they're launching a PE fund, and we will be their administrator. They will appoint, you know, the other people that they need to. But then you wait possibly for, you know, 12 months, 2 years until they've signed up their clients, they've done the fund launch process. My interest, and I know you sort of hit it on the head right at the start, was I wanted to go to the source of the process, digitalize it at that stage, not make it digital. Sorry, not make it digitalized, as in take a piece of paper and stick it in a sort of a scanner and make it digital. I wanted to make it digital at source. Yes. So we broke in, and that's our first conversations with the guys over at Kerry Olsen, was how do we get rid of you as a lawyer doing all of the stuff that you do in law? Can't we just put it into a digital system and generate a digital legal agreement? And Tom was like, well, you can. Why don't we give it a go? So we did some work with a firm called Avoca, who is a tech startup. We actually met them through you, Chris. You got me introduced to Shruti over at Alan Overy through their Fuse program. We were really impressed with a couple of the firms that they introduced us to via you. And David over at Avoca really he and I just sort of had very similar thoughts. He was very open, wanting to try different things. And so we made a digital side letter with some embedded smart contract clauses that allowed that letter to be generated by the law firm, passed across in a digital way through this Avoca system to be signed by the end investor and the law firm that was acting upon them. When the final signature was done, it automatically got processed across to me as a digital document. We picked out the embedded smart contracts, which then got deployed onto the blockchain and then managed the exclusion clauses for that individual client. So a very simple proof of concept. We went live with it pretty much straight away. And we are currently working on making a fully digital LPA agreement. So we're moving into the fund launch space and saying, actually, let's put technology into the arms of the lawyers and the fund managers so that they can start to do this. So for me, and this is where it starts to get a bit grey as to how this, impacts Northern, but this is why I'm going to look at what Northern does and say, well, actually, we don't need to do that. We do that because the model is broken today.
Yes.
So we receive a paper document and we key it into a system, right? And then we manage that process. Now the document is generated in a digital format and feeds automatically into the system, and I don't need to key it in. And it also means that the workflow is then managed automatically. Smart contract technology allows us to then start looking at how do we manage that business logic through the life cycle.
It's exception only, isn't it? It's why meddle if it's smooth?
That's the plan. And look, these things, we've picked simple funds with simple clauses, right? But we're now picking more complicated funds with more complicated clauses. There's drawbacks to all of this. Legal people looking at a digital clause is not simple, and the technology is not quite there. But you make it digital at source, you can then automate the downstream functions. And that's not just us, that's secondary markets, that's valuation generation, that's audit, which we've already done with the guys over at PwC. That's money transfer. So you're now looking at, can I now transfer automatically from a GP's bank account, an LP's bank account into GP's bank account? Yes, you can, right? I can send a message across to do that. So Swift allows us to start doing that. We've also started to work with a couple of challenger banks around access to faster payments in the UK, and then all the work that they're doing in Europe and the States. So we're looking at how do we use other players who are doing it well to actually just hook into their networks and saying, I don't need to rebuild any of this. But what you'll end up with is birth to death in let's not say fully automated, because that's a big statement and I don't think we'll get there, but let's say a much more automated way. The impact of that to me is that this is private equity. It's no different to real estate, really, VC funds, hedge funds, infrastructure funds. It's basic TA when you start to look at it, right? But it's just TA what no one's really spent a lot of money on, because it's been complicated and, you know, single transactions rather than multiple. But it allows us to start to use the same technology then to look at other asset classes. And the benefit is every act, and this comes back to the pain point analysis. Every actor got a benefit, and every actor got a benefit out of something that we built for them, without them having to spend money on it specifically. But I did borrow their knowledge, and I did borrow their expertise, and I did, you know, implicitly let them know that in some cases they would lose revenue by being part of the program. Now, the end goal there is the LP should spend less money on making investments in private equity, which is in effect good. But more importantly, they get full transparency into every single piece of data that they can extract out then in the way that they want to. So when we went to see the likes of CalPERS and CalSTRS, their biggest issue was just data quality, data transparency. They didn't even know, in some cases, the carry calculations were so complicated that it was very difficult for them, with the information they were being given, to work out whether they were being charged the right amount of management fees. This model allows them to get every bit of data out in the data that they want, and then you can either just plug it into your calcs, or I suspect where we will end up is that there will be third-party vendors attached to the ecosystem who validate the carry calcs in real time.
So you mentioned CalPERS and CalSTRS as some of the largest pension organisations on the planet, and some of the most sophisticated. What, to the man on the street, man or woman on the street, you are working for them? It's on the infrastructure, it's the back end, it's the bottom of the iceberg, in order to give them accessibility to a potentially far greater set of investment vehicles, diversification, performance, etc. That's one of the benefits to them, isn't it?
Yeah, I worry about that statement in a little bit. It's difficult to say that we will ever get it to a point where the man on the street can get direct benefit from investing into a private equity fund, right? There are inherent issues around, you know, the valuation point and the structure. You know, the fact that it's a commitment process, that you put money up front and then it's drawn on when you need to invest it, right? So the structure of those sort of private equity funds, I don't think is suitable for retail for various reasons. The premise, though, Chris, is exactly right, is can I make the process more, so one of the reasons why a lot of institutional investors for their pension fund clients do not invest in private equity is it's illiquid. You know, when you want to get out, who do you sell to, right? And if you're a known seller, there's probably 100 firms in the world that will buy PE secondaries. There's probably 50 that are active at any time, and there's probably 10 that are really big enough to do it. Right. So you've got a really small market, and it may take 6 months to sell a basket of assets. That's not suitable for most pension funds these days. Maybe some, exposure into PE is becoming, has been increasing for a while, or certainly into alternatives, if not specifically PE. So I see that the first instance is, how do I make it more accessible to those pension fund investors, so that they feel comfortable making those investments, and that they've got the transparency, and it's cheaper for them to do it. That's the first goal. I think retail is probably a little bit too far, but the man on the street invested in a pension fund from an institution, we'll see. The DC business is interesting because of the way there's a couple of big DC fund structures that have now got PE in their investment pools. They're still not the easiest thing to manage, and if we can make that a bit easier so they can get in and out, but you've seen what's happened to property recently. Gates go down, no one wants to buy and sell, or you can't buy and sell. PE will be as complicated as that. So it's trying to figure out how far we can go down that route. My goal, though, Chris, I guess, is I don't see why this ecosystem shouldn't work in the same way for other assets that are more transparent and easily tradable, right?
I'm drawing, that's my picture. There's a chain of events. You call them the actors. Man and woman on the street is separated by, not separated, that's wrong. They're facing into a chain of actors and processes and systems that are out of their control. But all of these elements of technology, behaviors and system all interact with each other. I think one of the big French accordion things. Ultimately, if you're taking a little bit or adding value or a little bit of efficiency to each element, then those savings in either time or money can be passed to the consumer, or can be passed that way so that the industry benefits. And so that's a story that a consumer can buy into, as the industry is. Yep. And then I saw another space where, just for talking about your private equity, it's not the speed of being able to take payments out, and you need time. Is that right? You need a bit of time for trades to end and things to settle through. Oh, there's a space there. Is there not like a float chamber that needs to be built that enables the Mr. and Mrs. Miggins who want to invest in private equity? Well, in order to do that, there needs to be a sort of a basket of capital that doesn't belong to anybody that allows them to do that. But not explaining myself very well at this hour in the morning, having heard your be there, Ant, but there are perceived benefits here that I think are worth exploring for the retail consumer.
The crux with all these things, I think, Alex, is the time it will take. So your thinking there, I think, is spot on, right? You're trying to either reduce an actor's cost footprint, money that they get paid, or remove them completely, right?
Yes.
So can you even bypass them with technology? Can you bypass them with whatever, right? That will reduce friction and speed up the process.
Yeah.
Right? The difficulty with all of these things is that if you build a brand new ecosystem and say, come along and play, that is a really quite difficult thing for people to do. And the first few in there, you don't see the benefit, right? You see the benefit once you've got flow through the platform. The other problem you've got is that there's a whole load of people in that chain that you've got there who are going to try and protect their existing revenue.
They'll hunker down
and they'll make it difficult for you.
Yeah.
Now, we have been working so far with people who are open to change. There are going to be some groups out there who are going to be very not open to change because it's easier for them to not change. So the whole issue around changing the world it's really quite difficult. And actually what we're trying to change is something that, you've got a whole load of people in the middle who have been there for years. And the reason they've been there for years is because it is difficult what they're trying to do, or complicated, and they want to get paid for that. And I think it's just, sometimes it's easier to think, I'll just, let's look at challenger banks maybe as a good example people can understand. The challenger banks basically launched an app that made your banking look a little bit easier, but actually gave you a lot less functionality than your traditional banks did. And the moment the traditional banks gave you an app that looked a bit like the challenger banks app, you sort of wondered why you would even go to a challenger bank, right?
Yeah.
And what the challenger banks struggled with was moving away from the fact that they built an app, and that they were then trying to figure out what the next thing should be. And some of them have done it differently. So, Starling have gone to back end, they've moved into business accounts, but really where they make their money is the back end pipe work into the faster payments network. So they've managed to find a niche for themselves in there. Some of the other challenger banks I don't think have, and I don't think will. They've got a fancy coloured card and an app. I like them and I like the model, but I think they're going to struggle to move.
Yes, they've got a lot of attention, but you're sort of saying, we've got a great ice cream store, great, but not everybody wants to buy ice cream all the time.
Correct. And therefore what you have to do is change the whole model, and that is hard, because if your customer doesn't want you to, because they don't see the value, or not enough of them see value, then you've got really no reason for doing it. You're just going to burn some cash. Building ecosystems, I think, is probably where the world will move to, right? But I think it's going to take a long time. And the problem with legacy is you've still got to code into it. So you've still got to get your flows into your legacy systems, because that's where your risk monitoring is. That's where your system monitoring sits. That's where your bank is comfortable, because they've spent millions on it.
Yeah.
You can't just start from scratch and go, I'm going to be this new thing that does the new thing, because then you're missing all of the safety and the trust that you've built up by doing it. So look, none of this is easy. And I think most of them will fail because it's not easy. And I think when we started looking at TA originally, and I think, Chris, you and I did talk about this a while ago, those original concepts that were out made a lot of sense, but the partnership model that they put in place didn't really work. There were too many owners that wanted to say, and they all wanted to do something different, and the vision wasn't quite right. And then you're just looking at it going, oh, but now I've got to move all of my assets onto this new thing and have this new TA thing do this. And that's, I don't really want to do that. That's quite risky. So I'll put a little bit on. So look, this isn't easy. And I think what we will end up finding is that in a niche like, and the private equity world is a bit nichey, right? From where we started looking at, we may get that over the line. And I say we may, it's been 5 years now. We've made an awful lot of progress, but we are nowhere near as far forward as I thought I would be. But we're probably a lot further forward than most people thought we'd ever get.
So
5 years down the line.
So I think you had a very fast start. Put it into context. And keeping up that pace was nigh on impossible. But look, I think I'm really keen to know what's coming up, what's next. But I'm going to interject with a quiz, I'm afraid. We've had a wonderful story, and now it's I'm going to put a great shot.
And that's Ant's bit. He did that bit. I just went off on the tangent. But if you've got lots of things like Ant,
that's innovation, Alex.
Then you've done the thing that you said isn't possible, which is create a new chain. So I'm going to. So don't underestimate the power of a few people when motivated can't change the world, because that is all they've ever done. Is that right, Chris? Is that the quote?
It's something very much like that from President Bartlett.
Right.
I think that, just to put it into context for you, Ant, it is a multiple choice quiz. There are merely 5 questions, which gives you odds of at least one correct answer.
We'll see.
It's a multiple choice of four answers. So you
don't ask me anything about biology, finance, or beer, because I'll just look embarrassingly stupid when I don't know the answers.
They are biased towards your CV as advertised on the delights of LinkedIn. Exactly. So that's where we start, which is why Andy has the advantage of experience, but the disadvantage of context. This is he knows nothing about microbiology, I believe.
Not actively, no, but I've probably succumbed to a few bugs that are made of microbiology.
You've drunk some beer before, right?
I've dedicated a lot of my time to the drinking of beer. Yeah.
So, topically, question 1.
Okay.
Which of these is not a real, and I'm saying purchasable if such a thing exists, ale? Which of these is not a real ale that you can actually buy? Is it A, Tactical Nuclear Penguin? Is it B, Great Big Kentucky Sausage Fest? Is it C, Pathological Lager? Is it D, Boom Schokolager? And I'm going to go, because I'm unfair like this, I'm going to ask the uninitiated Andy to go first.
What's the second one?
Do you want me to? So they are Tactical Nuclear Penguin.
No, it was B. That just made me laugh.
No, listen, Tactical Nuclear Penguin, Great Big Kentucky Sausage Fest, Pathological Lager, or Boom Schokolager?
D, Boom Schokolager.
You're going for D, Andy, Boom Schokolager.
Yeah.
No, I was going to go the same. I think though, Chris, Tactical Nuclear Penguin was made by Brewdog, and I don't think they ever sold it as a real ale.
Oh no, look, you're getting pedantic on me.
Let's get into it. They made a beer. They then stuck it through an ice cream factory to take out the water to increase the alcohol content, and then they put it into bottles. So it was never sold as a real ale. So I'm going to go with D as well with Alex. I think he's probably right, but I think you probably maybe need to do a little bit more homework on your A.
I feel this is like Mastermind and being beaten up. This is just
the chair's being thrown at you, hasn't it?
Well, right. My question was inaccurate, but however, let's carry on to question. Let's hope that this doesn't continue. Question two. Question two. Which of these is not, you see the theme, a real fintech firm? I'm not even going to say purchase it all because I get into trouble. So it's not a real fintech firm. Are you ready? A, is it Smart Monkey? B, Lunch Badger? C, Fat Llama? Or D, Mortgage Hippo?
This is when brainstorms go wrong.
Do you want me to?
Generally, they went, we want to be taken seriously by investors. Let's call ourselves Lunch Badger. Like, come on. Even I've done some right shocker projects of which I've been at the helm, but there's no way I'd go out there with some of these names.
Are you ready? 3 of those are true. Right, Smart Monkey, Lunch Badger, Fat Llama, Mortgage Hippo. Andy, what do you reckon?
Lunch Badger.
I can't even say it again.
Fat Llama.
Fat Llama. Right.
Fat Llama. That can't be a business, surely.
Right. Now this is a much more serious question. You ready? C. SC Ventures, Standard Chartered Ventures and Northern Trust recently launched Zodia Custody. Yes, exactly. You ready, Ad? Providing cryptocurrency custody solutions. So cryptocurrencies already represent about 0.3% of the world's currency and bank deposits. But what is their predicted growth, the compound annual growth rate from 2019 to 2024? So growth rate. Is it 12%, 22%, 32%, 42%? I lulled you into a false sense of security. Now with a tough question. Ant, go for it.
I think it's probably at the 12%-ish.
You think the lowest end, 12, 22, 32 or 42? You think the lowest?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Okie dokie. Andy?
Well, to create drama, 22%. There's no way it's going to have a CAGR of 42%. Not if my GCSE maths won't allow it. So B, 22%, please.
Okie dokie. Question C.
Yeah.
Which of these is not a cryptocurrency? Are you ready?
Yeah.
Not a cryptocurrency. Is it A, Tartan, B, Polkadot, C, Elrond, and D, Tron? Tartan, Polkadot, Elrond, or Tron? Andy, go for it.
Elrond.
Elrond. You don't think the Elven Lord is in fact a cryptocurrency? Fair enough. Ant.
I think he probably is. Well, there's a company called Polkadot that works in the back end of DLT space, doesn't it? So I'm going to go with Polkadot because I don't think they've got their own currency.
You're going to go for Polkadot. Excellent. And question 5. This is an interesting one, actually. So Ant Forest is a scheme launched in August 2016 on the Alipay mobile app, which is all part of Ant Financial Group now. And it helps manage a personal carbon footprint. So whether you walk or public transport or pay online, etc., etc. But also the interesting thing is that when enough energy has been earned, they plant a real tree. So how many trees were planted in its first 3 years? Was it, this is a question around take-up really, I guess. Was it 0 trees, 2 million trees, 22 million trees, or 122 million trees?
I think it'll be a lot of trees, Chris.
You think it's a lot of trees?
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, they raised huge amounts of money through their cash funds, didn't they?
This is, the scale of their business is enormous.
I'm going to go with the biggest number. I think it's probably big, but probably a bit too big, but I'm going to go with
122.
Yeah.
Andy, what do you think?
It's not naught. That's just a sorry story.
That's what they call clickbait, I think, Alex, if it's naught.
Is it? The everyone, see, trees are quite environmentally unfriendly because they need a lot of water. That's what people forget. 22 million trees.
22 million trees. Are you ready for the answers, gentlemen?
I think I've got none right now, which
and
is
the reckoning. Are you ready? But this is like your specialist subject, Anne. I mean, you came out so strong.
I know.
You ready? Number one, which of these is not a real ale? Tactical Nuclear Penguin is in fact brewed, as you quite rightly said, by Brewdog. 32% was one of the strongest beers at the time, or marketable at the time. So that's true. Great Big Kentucky Sausage Fest is also a real beer by Against the Grain. Yeah. Pathological Lager is also a real beer by Dock Street Brewing Company. Boom Shocker Lager, my idea is not in fact a real beer.
Well done, Alex.
Well done. Well, we went from. Oh,
no, you both got it right.
Both got it right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done. Are you ready for the next question?
My drinking behaviour is fine.
So, by the way, I decided not to list Citra Arse Down, Audrey Hopburn, and Optimus Prime as also potentials. They are all true.
Yeah. I've had Optimus Prime. It's a very nice beer.
You see, this is a topic that you're going to get right. Which of these is not a real fintech firm? Smart Monkey, Lunch Badger, Fat Llama, or Mortgage Hippo? The answer is Smart Monkey.
There's a firm called Lunch Badger.
Lunch Badger is deploying microservices on the cloud. Fat Llama is to rent almost anything. Mortgage Hippo is a digital lending platform. Smart Monkey just happens to be a digital marketing agency in West Sussex.
Wow.
So yes, go figure, I think is the phrase you're looking for.
Wow.
And the question is why is it difficult for fintechs to sell into finance, right?
Yeah.
I refer the gentleman to the answer to my previous question.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Question C, about Zodia custody and the growth of cryptocurrencies is estimated to be 32%.
Oh,
so massive, I think is the answer.
Wow.
Neither of us.
No, I'm afraid not. So the next question, on which of these is not a cryptocurrency? According to my sources, which I'm sure that Ant will lay claim to, the answer is tartan. Polkadot is supposedly a cryptocurrency, as is
Elrond.
Yeah, Elrond and Tron.
Tron's quite cool, isn't it? Yeah, that's a good name. That's a good name.
So we have
another one called Vader. Yeah, but tartan. Okay, so we're still 1 for 1. We've only got 1 point each.
This is it. The cliffhanger.
Decider. This is decider. Against the most intelligent man in the world. Here we go.
Are you ready? So Ant Forest, in the first 3 years of operation, actually planted 122 million trees.
Hollow victory there, Alex. Hollow victory. I mean, I went Fat Llama. I don't deserve to win after going for Fat Llama.
Do you know what? What a good quiz. I think I engaged more with that quiz than other quizzes. Well done. What a sport. Sports winner.
Excellent. So look, we've got a couple of minutes left. And so I just wanted to ask you, I guess, 2 or 3 final questions. One is, what's the biggest thing on your delivery list horizon for 2021? What are we looking at for you to push on to next? Is there things that we can look forward to?
Yeah, so I mean, to be fair, there's quite a lot going on, which is quite exciting. We're in that sort of phase of just getting stuff done right now. We're having a look again at how we run some of our projects to make sure that we can get them done as efficiently as possible. I think we've got into a bit of a loop of getting a bit too much governance in place. So we're having a bit of a think about how we should try and speed things up. But we are looking at, we did our fractionalization of bonds with Bondi Value in Singapore. That is progressing. There's going to be more going on there. We're still working with the ASX in Australia about the replacement of chess and where we fit into that. we have got a couple of big bits of work which we're just going to go live with soon in the States, which I can't really talk about, but they're pretty exciting in that sort of, let's say,